Hey, before we get started, I wanted to let you guys know about the next episode of the Elusive Exclusive Book Society. That's going to be happening on Saturday, February 22nd at 7 p.m. EST. We're going live on Nick's channel, The Book Graveyard, and we're going to be reviewing this book, The Big Guy by Wade Miller. This is a bit of old school, hard-boiled gangster crime drama. It's pretty interesting. I'm already halfway through it, actually. And we will be joined by two brand new special guests, Duncan McCurdy and Jim from Mystery and Mayhem. Should be pretty interesting. I'm looking forward to that discussion. And so again, that's going to be Saturday, February 22nd, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the Book Graveyard. Hope to see you guys then. But now, let's get back to the video. Cue the intro. Hello there, fellow travelers. I'm Tim from Secret Fire Books, and I have been in a very nostalgic mood recently. I have been very nostalgic for a specific series of books from my childhood, and it's a series that I was absolutely obsessed with as a kid. And weirdly enough, it's not really talked about that much nowadays. I've seen a few people on YouTube talk about these books. I think Brian Lee Durfee did some book reviews on this series a few years ago, but it doesn't get quite as much attention as I would have expected because it was fairly popular when I was a kid, and I absolutely loved it. Between the ages of 9 and maybe 14 or 15, I could not get enough of this series. I lived and breathed it, and it is, of course, the Redwall series by Brian Jacques. These are just a few of the books from the Redwall series from my collection. The first one was written in 1986. I have the hardcover here. I don't know what happened to the dust jacket. It might be stuffed in a drawer or a desk or something in my room somewhere. But the first book was written in 1986. The last one, The Rogue Crew, came out in 2011, which unfortunately was the same year that Brian Jacques passed away. But he left behind quite a legacy. This is a 22-book series. And I think it's kind of unfortunate that it's not talked about nowadays because, like I said, it was really, really special, or at least I remember it being so. A bit of history between me and the series. I was first introduced to it not through the books, but actually through the cartoon. There was an animated series that aired on PBS, and I think I caught a lot of the reruns as a kid. And looking back on it, it wasn't anything too special. It had some pretty janky animation, some pretty awkward voice acting, if I remember. I think they took a few liberties with the plot and toned down some of the darker aspects of the plot. But I was interested in it because it was talking animals in a medieval setting. And in a household where Disney's Robin Hood and The Sword and the Stone were on constant replay on our VCR, I was very much into talking animals in a medieval setting. And I think I was 9 years old when this happened. I was at a family reunion, and I woke up one day and my neck really, really hurt. I don't know if I still don't know what happened to me to this day. It was either like a pinched nerve or torn muscle or something. But when I woke up that morning, I could not turn my neck. And if I tried to, it was actually searingly painful. And so while the rest of my family ran around doing all the fun stuff with our relatives, I sat on a bench in the corner of our room and did nothing. But I noticed that sitting on the bench next to me was a book that one of my older cousins had set down, and it was a copy of this book, Mossflower. And I saw that cover with those animals in medieval dress. I saw that the mouse with what appeared to be a broken sword handle knotted around his neck, and I was like, "That's really interesting." And it kind of reminds me of that Redwall cartoon I've seen. And so, of course, I learned that it was a series of books that was adapted into a cartoon. And the next chance I got, when my parents took me to the library, and of course when my neck had healed up and I was feeling better, I sought out the Redwall books, and I came across this one, Salamandastron. And all I had to see was that badger dressed as a knight on the front cover. and I was down. I think that character is named Lord Earthstripe the Badger. It's a pretty cool character. And yeah, I read that book, finished it in like a week, and I was hooked from that point on. Like I said, I was obsessed with this series. Could not get enough Redwall. And then, obviously, as I got older, I drifted away in my teen years. But I always meant to come back to the series because I did not read the whole series. It is a 22-book series. And what's interesting about these books is that they're all standalones. Brian Jacques wrote the books out of chronological order. He started with the first book, Redwall, and then he kind of jumped all over the place in the chronology of this world. And so every single book in the series, with the exception of maybe one book that comes to mind now that I think about it, these are all standalones. They are all self-contained stories that you can read in any order you want. And I always really appreciated that as a kid. It meant that I could go into the bookstore or the library, find a cover that I really, really liked, and just read it. And I didn't have to worry about knowing anything about the rest of the series. It was a lot of fun. Now, of course, this is the internet, so people will correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the way the series began was that Brian Jacques was a school teacher in England. He was a teacher at a school for the blind, and Brian Jacques, as I remember, was a pretty interesting guy. He was a very opinionated gentleman. He had a lot of strong opinions about literature and books, especially books aimed at kids. And he was dissatisfied with all of the children's books in the library at his school. And because it was his job to read to these blind children, he could not put up with these books that didn't meet his standards. And so, much like a certain alien warlord that we all know, he rolled up his sleeves and said,
"Fine. I'll do it myself."
And he wrote this book, Redwall. He wrote it in 1986 and read it to his class, and they loved it. It was a big hit in Brian Jacques' classroom. And unbeknownst to Jacques, one of his colleagues actually took the manuscript and sent it off to a publisher behind his back, didn't give him any warning. And so, quite by accident, Brian Jacques now had a book deal with this publisher, and the rest was history. He wrote 22 books in the series, and they were a big hit in both England and overseas. Obviously, in America, they had a big presence as well. Now, because these books were originally written basically as teaching aids for visually impaired students, the writing style that Brian Jacques employs in this series is a very vivid visual one, for lack of a better term. And it's not so much that he's overly descriptive in his writing, he just chooses his words very, very well. He meant to paint a very vivid, colorful picture in his reader's mind while he was writing these, because, of course, he was reading them out loud to visually impaired students. And so it gives the series a very, very unique style. And something else that's pretty interesting is that it's kind of a forerunner of what we now know as the cozy fantasy subgenre. I hate using that term, but it's kind of true. When you use the term cozy to refer to fantasy nowadays, usually what comes to people's mind is fantasy books that are they're rom-coms but set in a high fantasy world, or there's stories about half-orcs opening coffee bars, but that's not what these books are. Really, they're not fantasy at all. I know I said they were fantasy, but there's no real supernatural elements other than the fact that they are about talking animals. They are very much these straight-up action-adventure stories that take place in a world where there are no humans, or at least not that I know of. It's all anthropomorphic talking animals who engage in siege warfare with medieval weapons. It's pretty wild. But that cozy element is definitely something that pervades the series. There is a real sense of elements of friendship and camaraderie and belonging. That's something that I always found really integral to this series, that the characters are always looking for a place to belong. And usually it comes in the form of found family, or characters having to experience the dangers of the outside world in order to appreciate the friends and family that they do have. It's definitely stuff that was written for kids, but it has a very wholesome message that applies to anyone of any age. And so if you're watching this and you're thinking, Tim, why are you talking about, you usually talk about sword and sorcery and classic science fiction on this channel. Why are you talking about reading these these goofy kids books about fuzzy talking animals? This stuff is no joke. There are some, warm fuzzy moments, but there's straight up siege warfare in these books. There are dismemberments, decapitations. There is some really violent stuff in this series. And it's part of what really drew me to the series as a kid, because Brian Jacques does not talk down to his readers. He knows he's writing for a young audience, and so he leaves out certain elements that other fantasy writers might include in their stories, stuff that he deemed that would be unimportant to a child reader. But he doesn't talk down to his readers. He makes sure that the kids reading these books know that there is such a thing as danger. There is such a thing as death and sorrow and sadness and grief. And once you deal with that stuff, once you live through that stuff, only then can you get to the good things in life. Only then can you appreciate the family and the friends that you have and the happiness that your life is worth living for. So they're books that have a very strong ethos to them, even though it is very, very simple. Okay, I'm really starting to ramble. The point I was trying to make with this video is that I need to get back into the Redwall series. I've put it off for far too long. I should have finished this when I was a kid. It still irks me that I don't have all the books in my collection. That should have been something that I took care of years ago. But yeah, I am going to give top priority to the Redwall books in 2025. That is going to be my main reading project for this year. And that might bring up a few complications on my part. First of all, there are a lot of books I said I was going to read in 2025. In fact, I made a video at the end of 2024 talking about the books I'd be giving top priority this year. And I still want to read all those books. I still really do. But my desire to collect and finish Redwall is just a little bit more than my desire to read all those, if I'm being totally honest. So I know that's very selfish on my part, but first of all, it's my channel. I'll do what I want. And second, if I'm being totally honest, and I don't want to get too into the weeds here, but 2025 has not been the best year for me so far. I've been in kind of a funk lately. I need something to cheer me up, and I figure I need something that is comfortingly familiar and at the same time a little challenging. And so rereading the Redwall books from my childhood will definitely be a sort of familiar comfort for me. And the challenge will come in collecting the rest of these. If I wanted to, I could buy all of these books off of Amazon. I know they're all 22 of them are readily available for purchase on Amazon. But I am trying to spend less money on books this year. That is something that I promised myself I would do. And so I'm really trying to save money. I will probably end up buying most of these from used bookstores and thrift stores. It'll add sort of a treasure hunt aspect to it, and that's at least how I'm choosing to look at it. But yeah, that is going to be my main reading project for 2025, collecting all of the Redwall books and rereading the entire series. The only thing that I'm going to leave up to you guys is which way I should read the series, or which order I should. Because, like I said, Brian Jacques pretty much wrote these all out of order. He just picked a moment in the history of his universe and just wrote a story about it, regardless of which books came before it. And that might make for some odd retcons, maybe. I definitely know that he retconned a few things in later books that seemed pretty concrete in earlier books. But I could read them in publication order if I wanted to. In fact, I have the first 5 books in publication order, so that'll be a little easier on my part. But I could also read them in chronological order. I don't have the first book chronologically, but I could get it fairly easily. And that would be pretty interesting, seeing how the world of Redwall kind of unfolds. Obviously, he didn't plan everything out from the beginning. He never even intended these books to be sold in bookstores in the first place and made available to a wider audience outside of his classroom. But it would be pretty interesting to read the entire series from beginning to end and see the full history of this world. So I'm going to leave that up to you guys. After I post this video on YouTube, I will put up a poll, and you guys can choose whether I will read this series in publication order or in chronological order. Either way, I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm going to be revisiting a fantasy world that I absolutely loved as a kid, and I will definitely be making videos about the series in the future. I will probably do some short reviews for each book in the series as I finish it. So look forward to that. But that's all for now, guys. Let me know, as always, in the comments. Have you read the Redwall books? What did you think of them? What is your favorite book in the Redwall series? And until next time, as always, farewell and keep reading.